Now, please settle down. Now, today's lecture is nothing but the extension of what we learned in my last lecture. Autonomic nervous system. So, one fourth of the lecture of today is just a repetition, detail of what we learned earlier. Basic learning objectives of today's lecture are: would you please keep quiet? We will revisit the synthesis, release, receptors, and degradation of acetylcholine, which what we studied last week. And we will build from that information, go a little further. We'll classify the polynergic agonist drug based on the mechanism of action. And then once we know the mechanism of action, once we know the pharmacological action, we will correlate the clinical uses of polynergic drugs with their mechanism of action and of course pharmacological actions. And then some adverse effects and perhaps some drug interactions we will also. So this is simple, straightforward. Polynergic nervous system, the application of those physiological effects, how those pharmacological actions produce due to activation of those receptors will be helpful in some disease management. If you remember those physiological actions, you remember what happens when muscarinic receptors are activated? You remember what happens when nicotinic receptors are activated? Okay, in that case, it will be just a piece of cake. The few names of drugs. Polynergic agonists should we call them as parasympathogamic drugs? Can we call them?
Yes, because
What about
except the sweat.
so generally in the textbooks or in other sources of information, you will find parasympathomimetic and cholinomimetic and cholinergic agonists as synonymous with each other. So there is some technical difference. For example, parasympathomimetic means the drug which should behave like a parasympathetic nervous system. But actually, this does not have, there are few exceptions which we discussed. For example, there are cholinergic fibers in brain cells. They are not part of parasympathetic nervous system, they are part of sympathetic. So some basic fine differences. So these drugs which we are going to discuss today, they stimulate parasympathetic nervous system in the same manner as does acetylcholine. Cholinergic receptors, just a recap, two types, nicotinic, muscarinic, nicotinic, once again, two types in the ganglia, in the neuromuscular junction, muscarinic M1, M2, M3. We discussed just to refresh in your memory. Same thing, just to refresh in what happened in the last lecture. Similarly, nicotinic receptors, signal transcription mechanism, ion channel, what happens when those receptors are. Life cycle, same, but here I want to be specific. The drugs we are going to discuss today, there are 6 stages in the life cycle of acetylcholine. However, there are only 2 states which are modifiable by the drugs. 2 states which are modifiable by the drugs. One state is direct action at the receptors, post synaptic effector organ. Post synaptic effector organ, be it muscarinic, be it nicotinic. Direct action at receptors, we will call it receptor agonist. receptor agonist. There's another state which we can modify with drugs, which is what is potential mechanism here? Acetylcholine esterase inhibition. There is another state. We can actually modify the destruction, the metabolism or hydrolysis of enzyme acetylcholine esterase, which is responsible for the termination of the effect of neurotransmitter. That enzyme acetylcholine esterase is responsible for finishing the effect of acetylcholine at the receptor site. If we modify the action of that acetylcholine esterase, basically we are going to indirectly enhancing the action of neurotransmitter. Am I right?
Yes.
Are you with me? So these two states are modifiable in the context of this. Okay. Same thing which we discussed last time for the figure new. I didn't share this figure. Why? Because can you figure out, let's see, let me check your memory and IQ. Can you identify one action which we didn't discuss in my previous lecture? Hmm? We discussed all exocrine glands, especially distributed. We discussed. We discussed. Should I go back to the previous slide? We discussed. We discussed smooth muscle propagation. We discussed K2 receptor. We discussed bronchoconstriction. Okay. Now see this figure. I am going back to the slide which we discussed last time, and then see the results. Should I move?
Yes.
Is there anything different? Smooth muscle is there in M3. So smooth muscle is everything. Blood vessels, very good. So did I make a mistake last time? So why did I mention last time? I mentioned today. That is why did I make a mistake last time? Or was it intentional? It was intentional to tell you the difference. Because today, last time we were discussing the acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter. Today we are discussing the drugs. Okay, let me go back to the figure. So here this was the difference. Let me tell you one interesting thing the nature has given. Blood vessels have muscarinic receptors, NC receptors. Blood vessels have muscarinic receptors, NC receptors. But there is no intrasympathetic nerve supply. There is alpha 3, alpha 1 receptors, adrenergic nerve supply. Alpha 1 receptor activation leads to vasoconstriction. So that is main regulator of respiration, or arterial rhythm. Very interestingly, NC receptors are present in the blood vessels. There is no intrasympathetic nerve supply. So when you use acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter, you use acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter, it will not produce any effect on the blood because there is no intrasympathetic nerve supply. However, in the context of today, we are discussing acetylcholine or any other effect as cholinergic agonist. The drugs which you exogenously administer to a human. In that case, it will be distributed in the whole body. It does not depend upon the innervation. The drug exogenously administered does not depend upon the innervation. Whereas last time we discussed acetylcholine as a neurotransmitter which depends upon innervation. So sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system has no any influence on the blood system. But when you use the same acetylcholine as a drug, and administered from outside, it will have effect. Because muscular receptors are present. Did you get this difference?
No.
Come on. But so hard, it's not very difficult. It's finished. In the blood vessels, who said no? In the blood vessels, muscarinic receptors are present. In order to stimulate those receptors, the drug or the endogenous ligand, in this case, neurotransmitter, must reach here. If there is no innervation, how the neurotransmitter, because neurotransmitter has to be released from the peripheral nerve ending. If there is no nerve ending in the blood vessel, then there will be no action of the acetylcholine on the blood vessel. Is that clear up to now? Now, today we are talking about acetylcholine not as a neurotransmitter, but an exogenously administered drug. It does not require a nerve ending to be released. It will be distributed throughout the body. So it will act on the receptors because the receptors were there already. But because of the lack of innervation, not out. Yeah. Good. Let's move. Now keep this in mind this difference. This is fundamental difference. So now let's move to the drugs. Accordingly, as I mentioned in the life cycle, we have two stages where you can modify. Either at the level of the post-synaptic effector organ receptor or at the level of acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. Accordingly, we have direct acting cholinergic agonist, direct receptor agonist, or we have indirect acting, which inhibits the enzyme acetylcholine esterase. Clear? Once again, those drugs which are indirectly acting, they do not modify the activity of the receptor directly, but indirectly by enhancing the effect of acetylcholine. They are of two types: reversible and irreversible. To remove direct acting cholinergic agonist mechanism of action is straightforward. Agonist means a drug which has the affinity for the receptor and has the ability to activate the receptor. It has the affinity for cholinergic receptor and activates it agonist, direct agonist. So you can see these are the acetylcholine receptors which can recognize the drug D binds the receptor and action is protein. Direct acting agonist. We'll discuss few drugs. Now acetylcholine not as a neurotransmitter. Acetylcholine as a drug. Same actions, repetition, what we discussed already, decreased heart rate, which receptors into decreased BP, decreased cardiac output, generalized vasodilatation, although no innervation by parasympathetic nerve from that I mentioned. In spite of the fact, no innervation, parasympathetic innervation, but acetylcholine administered from outside will cause vasodilatation. Now, once again, the $1 billion question. Let me confuse you. This effect is via MC receptors. Vasodilatation in the vasculature, MC receptors. Now, activation of MC receptors are coupled with which G protein? GQ. So GQ protein activation will lead to generation of IP3 and DAG, which actually I asked the question in the examination also. So anything in the blood vessels, when there is increased calcium in all the smooth muscles, in all the smooth they contract. But why here vasodilatation and blood vessels? Only the best student can answer. Yes, please. How? The issue is that in vascular smooth muscle, if there is increased calcium, IP3 and calcium, so that is bound to cause vasoconstriction, vesicular smooth muscle contraction. So, but I am saying here that it causes global vasodilation, yes?
Because like you said that it's a vasodilator, it's a vasodilator.
So, but I am saying that it is M3 receptor, and M3 receptor is always coupled with GQ. So whenever there is in any of the smooth muscle of the body, if you activate GQ, it will lead to increased calcium. It will cause contraction. Why vasodilation? Introduction.
Activates the inhibitory pathway,
Which one?
the GI, the inhibitory pathway.
GQ. We are talking about GQ, not GI.
Oh, yeah.
It is GQ.
Maybe the protein kinase C.
No, let me, no, it's not. Now the issue here is, yes,
Yeah,
Some-
something with nitric oxide.
oh, yes. How do you know you studied the internet or you knew it? Yeah, both. Okay. Now issue is that it is in the vessels, there are two parts. One is the thick layer, vesicular smooth muscle, and other layers. And inside there is endothelial layer. Okay. Endothelial layer, if you happen to increase calcium in the endothelial skin, it will cause the release synthesis release because it is a extruder part and it is like nitric oxide synthase. Do you know that?
Yes.
Nitric oxide synthase will cause the synthesis and the release of nitric oxide or what you rightly mentioned, EDRF. Previously it was known as endothelium derived releasing factor, EDRF. So when EDRF is synthesized and released, not from the vesicular smooth muscle, but from the endothelial skin, it will rapidly diffuse towards the vesicular smooth muscle cells and it will cause vasodilation. So when we say vasodilation, it is not the function of the vesicular smooth muscle, it is the function of the endothelial cells.
So the concentration of the nitric oxide overcomes the calcium present in the muscle.
No, the entry receptors in the vesicular smooth muscles are very scarce. It is the main preponderance of entry receptors are in the endothelial.
There's MP receptors in the endothelial cells.
Which are responsible for causing vasodilation.
The vasodilation is the release of nitric acid by the endothelial.
Correct. EDGF, not EDGF, EDRF. EDRF is nitric oxide synthase. Nitric oxide. EDRF, when the structure of several decades ago, in the early 30s, when we did not have the technology, we were not able to know exact, exact structure. Do you have a question? You want to know more? When the exact structure of nitric oxide was not known, it was only known that endothelium releases some factor, something which is responsible for the vasodilation. So at that time, just the term was coined as endothelium derived releasing factor. Later on, it was known it is nothing but nitric oxide. They are the same.
Can you please repeat what stimulates the nitric oxide synthase?
What is that?
What stimulates the
Calcium. Calcium. It is calcium dependent enzyme. So rather than intracellular calcium activates nitric oxide, which causes the synthesis and release of nitric oxide, which since they are adjacent attached, it immediately after release it diffuses towards the smooth muscle cells and causes vasodilation. Through the which mechanism? Cyclic GMP mechanism. You must be aware. Alright. Now acetylcholine, continuing the pharmacological actions of acetylcholine. Bronchoconstriction, N3, yes.
Are they in the endothelium or the smooth?
No smooth muscle, they are the increased salivary secretion and oral secretion and increased motility. increased tone of bladder muscle causing expulsion of urine, entry, meiosis, constriction of pupil, and however, in spite of all these lot of discussion, we don't use acetylcholine any for the therapeutic purposes. It is just for the investigational purpose to compare the new drugs with acetylcholine. Otherwise, acetylcholine is not a drug. It's not a drug. It is just for the comparison purposes. Got it?
Why?
Is it-
Has a drug happen?
There are so many parasympathetic effects in the body. If you use acetylcholine for one purpose, hundreds of other actions will be produced unnecessarily, which will lead to side effects. Besides, it is very ultra short acting. As soon as you administer it, you are administered.
Yeah.
As soon as you administer the drug, within minutes it will be deactivated by circulating acetylcholine transferase. Acetylcholine transferase is not only in the synaptic layer, but they are circulating transferase also. Interlevel and pseudocholine displays, which are there in the human body, which immediately convert acetylcholine into native products. So it is useless as a drug. You just can compare or give an in vitro preparation. See, for comparison purposes, otherwise. Okay. Now let's move to few drugs which are used. Methacholine, administered by inhalation for the diagnosis of bronchial airway hyperactivity in patients who do not have apparent asthma. Entry receptor activation will lead to bronchoconstriction in everybody. However, in methacholine can cause bronchoconstriction in all people. Asthmatic patients respond with intense bronchoconstriction. So this is just a diagnostic test for people who present not with the acute bronchospasm, but they complain that it sometimes I feel asthma, bronchospasm. So you want to check the bronchial hyperreactivity by challenging the bronchial smooth muscle with methacholine. The potential asthmatic patient will respond in exaggerated pressure. Okay? So this is the clinical use of methacholine. Bethanechol, another cholinergic agonist, not hydrolyzed by acetylcholine instead, given orally. Major actions on bladder and GIT, used in post-operative urinary retention, diabetic autonomic neuropathy. Why retention? What is the action of cholinergic agonist? Contraction of smooth muscle. Some people, especially after post-operative, they go into complete, what is the condition known as? When you lose the tone of the muscle, atonia. Okay. The urine is there in the blood, it is full. It is full. It exerts the pressure. The patient may feel the mercury is depleted. It is not coming out because the bladder is unable to contract. It has gone into complete atonia. So in that case, cholinergic receptor agonism may help to cause contraction of the smooth. We have carbachol, another drug, has both muscarinic and nicotinic action, degraded by other esterases. Rarely used because of non-selective action from both muscarinic and nicotinic receptors. Only used in glaucoma via topical instillation into the eye. Do you know about something about glaucoma?
Yes.
Eye raised intraocular pressure. Okay. Raised intraocular pressure, which may even cause irreversible damage to the eye, retina. So it may cause blindness. One of the major causes of blindness in developing world, glaucoma. So the major determinant of intraocular pressure, which is raised in glaucoma, is what? You know? Anatomically. Determinant. There is a fluid. Fluid, aqueous humor. Aqueous humor. aqueous humor which is synthesized by the ciliary body. And then that fluid, then the main function of that fluid is lubricate the whole chamber. And then it drains, it comes from the aperture, okay, from the posterior chamber to the anterior chamber, and then it drains into the on the side, on the lateral and medial side, there is trabecular meshwork. There is drain. So whenever there is accumulation or overproduction of aqueous humor, the pressure in the eye goes high. Aqueous humor production. So in that case, you would like to cause either the contraction of the ciliary muscle, so that okay, it's very difficult to explain now. I will explain to you in the next when we discuss about the drugs used in glaucoma, beta blockers, and color abnormality. Overall, it causes contraction of ciliary muscle. It decreases the production of by causing of meiosis. It causes the pulling of the iris, pulling of the iris on the lateral side, on both sides. Thereby, here there are openings. The trabecular meshwork, they are open. The diameter increases by pulling of the iris. The drainage of the aqueous humor is now facilitated. They are reducing the occlusive pressure. Just keep in mind.
Doctor's main function is contraction of the ciliary muscle.
Contraction of the endometriosis.
And
So pilocarpine, very important drug. Once again, I am highlighting pilocarpine. Natural alkaloids, more muscarinic effects, more effective in causing the rapid meiosis and contraction of the ciliary muscle, like carbachol. Drug of choice for emergency lowering of intraocular pressure in glaucoma is eye drops. Main use the drug of choice whenever you encounter a patient with narrow angle glaucoma, emergency, you want to lower down the intraocular pressure in urgently, this is the drug of choice. As soon as you will instill pilocarpine, because of the rapid meiosis, it will go down immediately.
Doctor, I have a question.
Yes.
What's the natural alkaloid?
It is obtained from the natural plant. Plant source, natural source. It is not synthetic, it is plant source. It is extracted from the natural sources. Also used in xerostomia after radiation treatments or in Sjogren's syndrome during COVID. Sounds difficult? Xerostomia. Zero means dryness. Stomia. Mouth. So in that case, what will be? Dry.
how is rapid I know, how does it treat glaucoma? What's the relation between the contraction of constriction of the muscle that
Now the issue here is, I'm sorry that you are at this point of time, you haven't been exposed to anatomy of eye. In that case, if you know, I will encourage you to go and see on your own how there are relations when the ciliary muscle is contracted, which is causes and causes the meiosis. There the direction of movement when the ciliary muscle is contracted goes like that. Okay. In that case, as I mentioned, the trabecular meshwork or in the narrow angle glaucoma, when there's the bulging of the iris, there's a bulging. I should have brought the figures. There's a bulging of the iris. What happens in the narrow is the angle between the iris and the trabecular meshwork. So that is why we call it closed angle or narrow angle glaucoma. So by causing meiosis, you are filling the iris so that you are opening that angle. So that now the drainage of the aqueous humor is facilitated, is improved. Okay. So you can read on your own. Anyway, so it is also used in xerostomia, dry oral cavity, because it causes increase in the secretion of saliva. All secretions are increased. If you have question, ask me directly. Okay. And Sjogren syndrome is also autoimmune disorders whereby it causes dryness. But keep in mind, see, here it is given orally. In the eye, for glaucoma, it is given topically, eye drops. So summary, I have mentioned here, you can read on your own. Let's move to next slide. The same thing what we discussed. Now, direct acting nicotinic agonist, we discussed up to now muscarinic receptor agonist. Now, direct acting nicotinic receptor agonist. Nicotine is one which is in the smoke or tobacco, not smoke. Nicotine, the primary alkaloid in tobacco products, binds to nicotinic receptors on autonomic ganglia, the adrenal medulla, neuromuscular junction, and in the brain. Nicotine exerts two effects: a stimulant effect exerted at the locus cellular and a reward effect in the limbic system. Once again, these effects are two individuals for neural block. Why people become addicted? Because the reward center in the limbic system is stimulated. The reward system means when you actually feel pleasure. Pleasure. Okay? That is why people are addicted to tobacco. Tobacco. We are talking about tobacco. Stimulant. Nicotine is a highly addictive substance. Nicotine also induces peripheral vasoconstriction, tachycardia, and elevated BP. So beyond this one slide, we are not going to discuss nicotine in more further because it is not a therapeutic drug. It is not a therapeutic drug. So just for the academic interest, I just mentioned in one slide. Okay, let's move to indirect acting now. We discussed direct acting, now indirect acting by inhibiting acetylcholine esterase enzyme, and we have two subclasses. Which one? Reversible and irreversible. Indirect acting cholinergics like this. This is the same figure which I showed you earlier. Direct acting agonist. See the difference here? These are the indirect acting. Acetylcholine acts on its receptors. The action of drug over here is direct binding with the receptors. But in this hormone, it does not bind with the receptor, rather it binds with the enzyme, acetylcholine esterase, which is responsible for degradation of acetylcholine. So in this way, due to its action, there is increased concentration of acetylcholine in the synaptic cleft, and that increased concentration for extended periods of time. Overall, enhancing the action of acetylcholine. These drugs do not exert their own pharmacological activity, but they enhance actions of acetylcholine. Clear? Okay?
Doctor,
Yeah.
isn't that the same effect as botulinum toxin?
Which doctor? Botox is that something else. We'll discuss. Okay. Anti-acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, drugs are acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, whatever you call them. Same. These drugs, by virtue of inhibition of acetylcholine esterase, cause accumulation of acetylcholine. Prior to World War II, only the reversible anti-choline esterase were known. You remember in my first lecture, I mentioned that World War II was a turning point for the synthesis and development of new drugs. Okay.
There are many people
Food restaurant. So during World War II, a new class of highly toxic chemicals, the organophosphates, was developed as agricultural pesticides and warfare agents, which are commonly known as organophosphate or irreversible acetylcholine esterase weapons, commonly known as, have you heard? You must have heard. Nerve gas. These are the nerve gases. The extreme toxicity of these compounds is due to their irreversible inactivation of acetylcholine display. So we discussed this both reversible as well as irreversible. Let's discuss few reversible and then lastly specialize on irreversible. Azosticmine increases intestinal and bladder motility. Used in GI bladder atony treatment of overdose of atropine. What is atropine?
It's one blocking.
Muscarinic receptor antagonist. So whenever there is a toxicity of atropine, you can increase the cholinergic activity by enhancing the action of acetylcholine. So once again, the same concept, initial pharmacokinetics, there is a competitive antagonism between an agonist and an antagonist. If there is activity of antagonist, you want to overcome the activity of antagonist, you have to increase the concentration of agonist. So in this case, in atropine toxicity, you have to increase the concentration of agonist, which is acetylcholine. Muscarinic receptor antagonist, which we will discuss in my next lecture. The next lecture is about anticholinergic drugs. Adverse effects, convulsions, bradycardia, its neuromuscular junction, accumulation of acetylcholine leads to paralysis of skeletal muscle at higher dose. Is it a mistake? Is it a mistake here? It is not down, it is an immediate. We are talking about neuromuscular junction. Anything, somatic nervous system. Okay. Hello, listen, in the back benches, we are talking about neuromuscular transmission. Whenever nicotinic receptor is activated, especially the NN subtype receptor by acetylcholine, there is a depolarization. That receptor is coupled with sodium channel, sodium goes in, and there is a depolarization and action potential is created. There is depolarization of the motor end plate, and then there is excitation, contraction, coupling leading to contraction of the myofibrin. You know this, all right? However, when there is a persistent activation of the nicotinic receptor, persistent activation of nicotinic receptor, I am not sure whether you studied in your previous lab this phenomena or not. That is a desensitization, or we know it because in order for the nicotinic receptor to be depolarized again, it has to be repolarized first. Okay, it has to be repolarized first, and then the next wave of depolarization will cause further contraction. If the agonist is present continuously at the receptor side and it is not detaching from the receptor, the further go into the polarization, and sooner or later it will go into the paralysis. Actually, there will be no more contraction because the myofibrin must be repolarized in order to be depolarized again. This phenomenon we will discuss in detail in my next lecture in the context of neuromuscular blockers. Neuromuscular blockers. So ivostigmine and then peridostigmine, it blocks the action of same acetylcholinesterase, intermediate acting. Patients can develop cholinergic side effects, okay, are pretty obvious, understandable. But there are some side effects, muscular side effects. Okay. Neostigmine, another drug, same. Okay, nothing of significance. Okay. Now, look at the last bit, used as antidote for tuberculosis. We discussed in the next lecture, and treatment of myasthenia gravis. What do you know about myasthenia gravis? Anybody from the back benches? Raise your hand. Does anybody know? Yes.
So basically, autoimmune disease in which T cells they combine or block the receptors of the acetylcholine, therefore inhibiting acetylcholine to bind
So you're going to have to make muscle weakness.
Very good. So it is not the blocking the action of acetylcholine on the receptors, but because of the antibodies, development of antibodies, the population of nicotinic receptors becomes less. Okay. Therefore, you feel weakness, especially the weakness is not in the morning. After some physical activity, you feel fatigue, weakness, and because of the less number of nicotinic receptors, you are not performing your actions. It's basically weakness of the muscle. Autoimmune disorders, as you mentioned, antibodies against nicotinic receptors. So these drugs are given for the treatment of myasthenia gravis, acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. Why? By increasing the concentration of acetylcholine for prolonged periods of time, more interaction between acetylcholine and nicotinic receptors. Now, edrophonium is very interesting drug. It is acetylcholine esterase inhibitor like neostigmine, hydroxyzine, but some interesting feature emphasized. Two short acting for therapeutic use, very short acting, used for the diagnosis of myasthenia gravis. Previous drugs were given for the treatment of myasthenia. This one, because it's too short acting, now see, edrophonium test, which is also known as Tensilon test. Now this is the characteristic feature of myasthenia, drooping of the eyelid. Even the woman is unable to raise the eyelid against the gravity. There are too much work for her, weakness of the skeletal muscle. She cannot raise the eyelids. As soon as she was injected edrophonium, Tensilon, you find this within seconds. Within seconds. So the test is positive for myasthenia gravis. So edrophonium among all the acetylcholine esterase inhibitors, by virtue of ultra short acting, it is used for the diagnosis of the myasthenia gravis, not for the treatment. Yes.
So it takes away the drooping, right?
Because it increases the concentration of acetylcholine immediately and it gives stress to the skeletal muscle. So in the clinic, then and there you can diagnose. If edrophonium was able to increase the strength, the power of the skeletal muscle, that means it was due to decreased neurotransmission. That means myasthenia gravis was positive. So,
For a short time.
short time, it is for short time. You can't rely on edrophonium for the treatment for the whole day because it is very short time, just for the diagnosis. Now, as I mentioned already, that having your nicotinic receptor agonist like acetylcholine or any other for prolonged periods of time on the receptors will actually cause paralysis. So, a patient with myasthenia gravis receiving acetylcholine inhibitor at high doses for long periods of time may actually develop cholinergic crisis. Cholinergic crisis. How? A potential major side effect of excessive anticholinergic medication is weakness, which can be difficult to distinguish from worsening myasthenia. Now, isn't it paradoxical? You gave acetylcholine esterase inhibitor for the treatment of weakness. The drug itself has caused weakness. How to distinguish it? The weakness is due to myasthenia. The myasthenia has worsened, or is it cholinergic crisis due to excessive dose of acetylcholine esterase inhibitor? How do you differentiate? Resolution. No. There are few differences I will mention here. Myasthenia crisis acute, cholinergic crisis hyperacute immediately. In myasthenia, pupils will be normal. If there is a cholinergic crisis, you will see pinpoint pupil constriction. Cholinergic toxicity. It is cholinergic toxicity. It is absent in the cholinergic crisis, there will be excessive sweating. Cholinergic toxicity. It is sweating. Normal heart rate, what is the action of acetylcholine on the heart? bradycardia. So these are the differentiated points. In the myasthenia, normal heart rate. In cholinergic crisis, there will be severe bradycardia. Normal secretions in myasthenia and cholinergic crisis, excessive secretion. So in the last, if you inject penicillin, hydroquinone to the myasthenia, he will improve. In the past, we saw, I showed you the figure. For the diagnosis of myasthenia, if you inject hydroquinone, if the strength of the muscle is increasing, then means myasthenia is positive. But in case if it is cholinergic crisis, what will happen? It will be worsened because it has been caused by the acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. It will work. Few more acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, donepezil. It is used in Alzheimer's disease. Why? Because it is a cerebroselective. It is highly lipid soluble. It immediately goes into the CNS. And you will learn in neurosciences block next year that one of the important pathophysiological mechanisms in dementia and Alzheimer's is the selective destruction of cholinergic neurons in the brain. Okay, so you are giving acetylcholinesterase inhibitors are routinely given for patients with Alzheimer's disease. Now some discussion, few minutes on irreversible. We discussed up to now reversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Nerve gas and insecticides such as parathine, whatever you buy from supermarket. Have you ever bought rat killers? Rat killers, cockroach killers.
Yes.
They all contain organophosphate compounds. Organophosphate, we are not talking about disinfectants or antiseptics. We are talking about insecticides, pesticides. They all are organophosphate compounds which are irreversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitors. Because of their easy access and easy availability is the point of concern. I will show you in the next slide. And they are somehow used in glaucoma. Organophosphate poisoning is due to exposure to insecticides, pesticides, in the agriculture also. You see, in the agriculture farmers they spray to do away from the pests and insects. So all contain, all of them, without fail, all pesticides contain organophosphate compound, reversible acetylcholinesterase inhibitor. Symptoms, cholinergic toxicity, increased saliva, tears, diarrhea, vomiting, excessive diuresis, sweating, muscle tremors, all these features of cholinergic toxicity. Is there any girl in this class from India or Pakistan? Is there any from Pakistan? Okay. India, so many. So you might be aware about this thing, organophosphate poisoning in our countries. Number one cause of suicidal deaths in both India and Pakistan. The reason? Number one cause of suicidal deaths. Organophosphate poisoning because we are agricultural countries, lot of pesticides, insecticides available in the farmlands. You must have read in the newspapers in your country, India and Pakistan, लड़की ने दवाई पीकर खुदकुशी कर ली. It happens every day. Let me show you the figures. Organophosphate poisonings are one of the most common cause of poisoning worldwide. There are nearly 3 million poisonings per year, resulting in 200,000 deaths. Documented figures. Yes.
So this was because of the use of the organophosphate, right?
Yes, because pesticides, insecticides, they are available everywhere in our countries. People use them in their farms. So since it is easily available, other forms of poisons are not so easily available. They are in the rural areas, they are in every home. If there is something happens, fight with the husband or mother-in-law or something, all of a sudden during that moment, you take out and drink it. Huh? Because of the easy availability in every home. We are the number one cause of suicidal death. So how do you treat when you are in the emergency? The patient comes to you, patient has not died yet. Hello, patient has not died yet. You have to say,
So you give aspirin.
atropine. Atropine is the antidote at muscarinic receptors. Because all the features we discussed in the previous slide, except the cholinergic toxicity, you have to antagonize. You have to antagonize those toxic features of organophosphate poisoning. Apart from that, you have another weapon in your hospital, which is prelidoxine. Prelidoxine is a unique drug in the sense that it competes with organophosphate compounds to bind with the acetylcholine esterase enzyme. Generally, it is irreversible binding provided the patient reaches you within few hours. If the patient reaches you within few years after the exposure of poison, you can administer prelidoxine and it is able to displace initially, in the initial 3 to 4 hours, it is able to displace poison from the acetylcholine esterase enzyme by presenting itself. Yes. Atropine has to be given anyway.
Or you give both?
Yes, both. If the patient has arrived, reached to you within 3 to 4 hours after the exposure of the poison, you can also administer prelidoxine. Once after 3 to 4 hours, the binding between the drug and the binding between the drug and the enzyme is aged. We call it aged. Now it is irreversible, completely irreversible. You can't displace the drug from the enzyme. In the initial few hours, prelidoxine can displace. But atropine is must. It has to be given anyway, irrespective of the time of exposure. Okay. So this is the table, last table I have prepared for you. The clinical uses, indications of the drug, selected drugs, drug of choice. For myasthenia gravis, the drug of choice is pyridostigmine. For dementia, Alzheimer's disease, a cerebroselective donepezil acetylcholine esterase inhibitor. For glaucoma, drug of choice is pilocarpine carbachylate ecothiazide. For reversal of oh my God, we will consider. Okay. Xerostomia, pilocarpine, penicillin-based atropine. Pyridostigmine is the second choice. Drug of choice is very good. Drug of choice is pyridostigmine. Pyridostigmine is the second one. And also neostigmine. Neostigmine. Okay, that's it. See you 2 days later.
Yes, stop it.